In the private equity space, part of the diligence is we think there's an opportunity of pricing improvement of some dollar amount to go get. In order to go get that, you're going to need to transform the way things are working, which is building out a team. And the transformation, the reason I like that word is it's all encompassing.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with Jon Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the entangled relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and I run boot camps to help companies get paid more. Our guests today are, I don't think I've ever done a dual podcast before. We've got Jon Jennings, who, as you all know, he's been a loyal sponsor of ours for several years now, and Ryan Walter, a new person joining Jennings Executive. Here are 3 things you want to know about Jon and Ryan before we start. I've already told you Jon's a longtime sponsor of the podcast, a very successful recruiter in the world of pricing. And Ryan has been in pricing leadership for over 15 years, and he decided to take a step back and become a recruiter. I have no idea why he did that. Welcome, Jon. Welcome, Ryan. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks, Mark.
Doing well.
Jon, we've heard from you before. I got to ask Ryan the ultimate question. How'd you get into pricing in the first place?
You know, I came out of my MBA program, was doing a concentration in business intelligence and predictive analytics, landed an internship at 7-Eleven's corporate office in their merchandising and operations analytics group, and ended up being a person who our leader felt he's got sort of a complex problem that he's not quite sure what to do with. He could throw me at it and I'd go figure it out. So did a number of different things while I was there. It was really fun. And one of the problems I worked on happened to be a pricing problem where our cigarette pricing had gotten out of line with the market in Florida, and we needed to figure out how to get it back into line with minimal financial impact. So lots of complications around that, but that was my first exposure to pricing, and I liked it and just ended up sticking with it.
Nice. Every once in a while, I hear a guest say, hey, I worked at so-and-so, and it's like, that would be a fun job, right? I think it would be a blast to know how 7-Eleven does pricing. So it'd just be fascinating. So if you ever want to come back and talk about 7-Eleven, we can do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Today, we're going to talk about private equity and the idea of placing pricing people in and around the whole private equity world. And so just out of curiosity, Jon, what caused this shift to private equity? I mean, you've been doing pricing placement for a long time.
So we started with like a large enterprise and, the big teams. I enjoy the private equity environments. They're a little bit smaller. I get to talk to ownership. It's a little bit more of transformational, like the 5-year cadence. It kind of makes sense of the pricing transformation. If you're kind of doing looking to sell something within 5 years, 2 years of building capabilities within pricing and then realizing it and doing, kind of continuous improvement for 3 and then selling makes a lot of sense. And we've gotten a lot of referrals from consulting firms that are in and others that are in the PE environment. And, I get that perspective from the leadership, the ownership, the consulting firm that's in there, and we can go in and solve a problem. And it's, hey, we've got a transformational roadmap. This is part of the investment thesis, and we're going to monetize it on the back end. That's like, sounds like a lot of fun versus, think about, large behemoth company doing a pricing transformation. It's a lot of fun, but it's just, it's a lot more nuanced with the queue kind of every quarter you're trying to get to a certain point. And this is a little bit more transactional. It's fun.
Yeah. Do they usually bring you in right at the beginning after an acquisition? Because I can imagine that if they wait till year 5 to make the pricing improvement, they don't actually get credit for it in the valuation of the sale.
So when they bring us in, I mean, there's usually so pricing's identified typically in diligence or kind of ahead of the deal as part of the investment thesis, and then it's about the roadmap, right? So sometimes we're brought in earlier, sometimes we're brought in mid, kind of a year or two in. We're trying to get in earlier every time, as even kind of coming out of that diligence and ahead of the deal to be able to help plan.
Mark, some of that too, I mean, we can absolutely come in and fill a box, but if you get in earlier, we love to be able to help guide and sort of de-risk the transformation by helping the client figure out what the boxes ought to be. Because depending on how you plan to leverage consultants, how you plan to leverage pricing optimization software, it really impacts the type of team you need to build internally to go forward after. If you're going to build a lot of capabilities yourself and do all of that in-house, you probably need a director of analytics and a data science team and all of that. Where if you're planning on outsourcing that to a consulting firm and implementing software, you probably need more of a continuous improvement kind of group that can sort of just take the handoff of that and move it forward without building it themselves. So I think that's what John and I are finding is getting in earlier it's a lot better for our clients.
It actually sounds like what you just said should be done pre-acquisition, post-diligence, but pre-acquisition, so that as we create the game plan for what we're gonna go do once the deal closes, we've got a really solid plan in place.
100%.
Yeah, and we can come in and kind of evaluate the current talent landscape, see if there's some people in there that they could, maybe be a value add to the transformation, or even, sometimes they have someone that's pretty good and then they're not getting paid at market, and there's transactions happening and the risk of losing them. It's like let's go put our arms around that person, make them feel, and then give them the resources needed, hear their plan out, and give them the resources they need to go execute. So that's sometimes the case, but either way, it's good for us to be a fly on the wall to be able to help.
Another thing we do just as a complimentary service for clients is to do an annual talent assessment. It's something that I would have loved when I was back in industry leading pricing teams, because sometimes you've got a rock star senior analyst or manager in place that you're super happy with, and they've been in role for 3 years and they've gotten merit increases, but the pricing market has just moved up a lot quicker than the rest of the market has. We're sitting on all this data with real time deals that have closed, and we know where comp is to be able to come in and say, hey, we think you have a lot of risk with this person based on where the market's at. So as a leader, you can find out, oh, I have some risk here before the person's letting you know that they got a better offer and they're making a change.
Yeah, interesting. Um, so Ryan, you've been in this business for forever, as have I, right? This whole pricing world. And a long time ago, most companies didn't really focus on pricing.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 5 to 10 years, it's become a much more important topic. But it seems to me interesting that private equity firms are still finding companies to acquire where they don't focus on pricing.
It's funny. When I started in pricing, I think there were starting to be a lot of senior analyst roles and there weren't very many manager roles. Then I moved into a manager roles. There were starting to be a lot of manager roles. There weren't that many director roles. I think we're at a place now where pricing is seen as this center of excellence to drive profit. It's hard to do because it's cross-functional and all the reasons that everybody who's out there doing this knows. But we're getting to a place now where that VP level talent is trying to figure out what's next. That's partly how I ended up in recruiting. It was a really interesting what's next. That said, out in the real world, there's a lot of talk about AI, but just getting your basic data foundation in a decent spot so you can start to do pricing work, I still think there's a ton of that opportunity out there.
Yeah, I hope I remember to ask you about AI later because I really love asking everybody how are they using AI? What does it mean? But when you walk into a new acquisition, how can you tell if they need a pricing manager, a pricing director, or a VP of pricing? What are the cues?
John,
Ryan,
you
you
want
want
to
to
take
take
that
that?
one?
Yeah. So I mean, it depends on. So you have to look at the market they're in, the size, how they're, kind of ask them how they're currently pricing, how they're thinking about it. Sometimes it's this is how we priced in the past. We don't really know our cost to serve. So we're kind of pricing on a cost plus model without the cost. So a lot of times we have conversations, the maturity is not even close to there. So it depends on how they answer these basic questions on the front end of how they're thinking about it, starts to evaluate, okay, well, where's the opportunity? Because, some of these businesses, there's less opportunity for price transformation than others, depending on the industry they're in. But if it's an industry ripe for transformation, we've seen it before. Well, now we can kind of look, like, there's a big difference between software and then like high SKU distribution and how you build your teams. But we've got kind of notes on FTEs for kind of, okay, we need a leadership person, strategy, analytics, execution, governance, and how many people are going to be cross functional in those, or kind of in each one. So as far as I think if you're going to do some sort of pricing transformation, you usually need some sort of leader, right? So that's where it starts, whether it's director or VP. Some businesses, they built the capability, so you need someone to sustain it. So that's when you can kind of go down and hire someone a little bit more junior, that you can train up and have, either a third party or someone internally that knows pricing to be able to make sure, keep an eye on things. Yes, but I hate to say it depends, but each company, depending on their size, it's gonna vary quite a bit.
And how do you differentiate between needing a director and a VP? Is it the ability to influence people inside the company?
It's, I mean, exactly, right? It depends on the org structure of the company we're going into, whether, some org structures, directors really senior, and others you need to be VP. So who you need to influence across the organization, just like you said. If you're a director having to punch up across the entire organization and influence VPs, that's a little bit more challenging. Um, and and so that's where we want to put them on the level footing. So oftentimes, we'll get to the end and that'll be a negotiating point of like, not trying to like gouge you for more salary, but sure would make my job a lot easier if I could have the same title of the people I'm trying to influence.
Yep. But is there a difference between hiring someone for a PE firm, a portfolio company, versus a standalone enterprise company?
Well, yes. So your stakeholders are different, right? So with private equity, you got the ownership and you got the leadership on the ground, right? So how involved is the PE in the portco is a question, because a lot of times they'll put out the breadcrumbs, and then you kind of, if you don't quite go down that road and you deviate, you have a little bit shorter leash. So it, whereas within other entities, whether they're standalone or in a P-backed environment that's a little bit more hands off, they can kind of navigate that transformation with a little bit more um, ability to kind of go down different paths, or willingness to. So that's I would say the biggest difference. And a lot of times in a PE environment, even if it's more hands off, there's kind of hey, we have an investment thesis, pricing's part of it. We need to do this. Where as other entities that we work with, we're kind of educating them and then bringing authority with consultants or with Ryan and me, to say, here's some opportunity to get a price lift, and here's the people you should talk to. So I think it's just a little bit different conversation. And it's nice to have sometimes a PE partner to massage all the different stakeholders on, hey, there's a big opportunity here. And they got that operating partner, pricing advisor, whoever is coming down and really planting the seeds of the idea, and it's coming from the board, versus, in other cases, it's coming from a consulting firm that said something, or us, or, the CFO ideation that's going up north. It's like kind of bottom up versus top down.
Yep.
Mark, I'd also say, PE gets lumped into one big thing, but I'd say different firms have really different approaches to how they interact with their portcos. And they also have different strategies as what they're trying to accomplish. Some PE firms, their strategy is, we want to acquire a company that we've assessed as being fairly broken with their internal processes and tools. And we have operating partners who specialize in each of these different areas. And we kind of have our playbook. So we purposely brought it because it was broke, and we have a playbook in order to fix it up and make it better. And that's how they're going to add value to resell it. Some PE has a roll up strategy where they're looking for a super fragmented market where they can get a bunch of synergies by buying a bunch of small businesses and grouping them together into a group and then selling off that group. So I think it's a mistake to think of private equity as one big thing, because each firm has its own approach to how they do things. One big difference, having worked in both private equity backed and publicly traded companies, is just the pace at which things happen. And some of that has to do with the size of the companies too. The publicly traded companies tend to be bigger, but I think that's something, as we think about talent, like in a private equity backed firm, they have an exit date and they need you to put points on the board at a fast pace. That's, I mean, I don't want to downplay the importance of driving results and performance in a publicly traded company, because there's expected there as well. But the pressure of quarterly earnings versus the pressure I've experienced from private equity heading for an exit are different and take different personality types and different types of leadership.
Yeah, one of the things I've experienced when I start working with a private equity portfolio company is the portco doesn't think they have a pricing problem as much as the PE firm thinks they have a pricing problem. Have you guys run into that, and how do you handle it when you're trying to place somebody?
So I'll fill that one. I mean, yes, we've run into that, and that is common. And it's an evolution. I mean, it's like the first conversation. It's like, well, you got this pricing thing, and we're told to do this, and we're going through the motions, and then it's on us to show them, right? We start talking to them about what's going on, and then we bring in the right talent to then, kind of garner that conversation. We build the materials on where the opportunity is, and we partner with like kind of a third party consulting firm that came in, and the PE and the, and the portco leadership, and they start to see it's like, okay, this is interesting, maybe, and then they talk to really smart people, and so we can sometimes we'll do two batches where it's like one segment of the batch is more junior, kind of within the budget that they envisioned. And the other is more of like, hey, this is maybe what can really drive some change. And the difference in those conversations sometimes can be palpable, where they're like, okay, they start to see it, and they hear the stories of what they've done at other organizations, and they see where they're at in the journey, and they start to benchmark it, and then the conversation keeps evolving. And the whole time the PE is kind of massaging it in a little bit. We're talking about these, telling stories of the impact these people have made on different business and how many bips they've kind of been able to, increase in price in similar types of organizations. And they start to get more and more curious. They're probably listening to maybe this podcast, or they're getting on ChatGPT and pricing transformation. They're doing all their research. And so it's usually an evolution. Most of the time we'll kind of land where we want to, as far as getting the buy-in there, to be able to invest in the right person, because sometimes the difference is glaring. And I tell people, like, if you're going to go for a pricing transformation, you got to like kind of dive in with both feet. Halfway doesn't typically work. So we've come in to a lot of companies where they say, hey, we're looking to do this, and we say, okay, well, this is what you need to pay. This is their fee. This is kind of what it's going to look like. And then they get, oh, whoa. And like, okay, we're going to promote someone internally. It's really smart. And they may or may not be, great, but they're not set up to succeed because they haven't done it before. And then they call us back. I had this happen once. And then they went and hired someone on their own. And that didn't work out because they went too junior again. They went middle. So they went low, middle, and they called me a third time, and then we filled it, and it seems to be going pretty well. But sometimes it's an evolution of, hey, try and fail, or just through the process of the recruitment, like we can kind of help them see the light there.
I've bought bad quality stuff too because I was too cheap. So
I mean,
I always hesitate to make car analogies with brands, because I inevitably offend somebody. So I'm not going to throw out any brand names, but it's different levels of cars at different price points that will get you different performance. And sometimes the performance matters more than in others. In some cases, knowing that there's a range out there, I think being able to show our clients, hey, there is a range here. What do you think is the best fit for what you're trying to accomplish, can be value add and helpful.
So one of the things I've noticed as we've had these conversations is you constantly use the phrase pricing transformation. And I actually love that. And it's very different from we need to hire a pricing person.
hmm
So, so Ryan, take a shot. Tell me why you say that. What's the difference?
So, I mean, pricing transformation is when you're at a place that's not very evolved and you need to very quickly get to a place where you're delivering. I mean, in the private equity space, part of the diligence is we think there's an opportunity of pricing improvement of some dollar amount to go get. In order to go get that, you're going to need to transform the way things are working, which is, building out a team. And the transformation, the reason I like that word is it's all encompassing because it's not really one thing. It's not, oh, we need to get a director of FP&A in here. It's we need to get somebody who understands strategy, who understands finance, who understands data and IT tools, and is a leader that can influence others. Because being able to do the cross-functional part of getting your head of sales on board in a B2B organization is a huge deal. So I think using the word, nobody says we're going to do an FP&A transformation, or maybe they do, and I haven't been around when it's happened. But I think transformation fits pricing because what needs to be done in order to really move the needle is so all encompassing.
And what I love about that though is that you're not going to hire someone and get the change. Right? What it's really gonna take is someone that says, "Here's what it takes to do this change." It takes a real effort, a real transformation, and you guys are essentially saying that up front. So, out of curiosity, do you place pricing people or do you just do pricing transformations?
What's the difference? So there's always, I mean, a transformation to be had, right? I mean, is anyone a 10 out of 10 in their org? I mean, I'm sure. I guess we could find whatever the most kind of advanced, mature organization. But usually when you're hiring a pricing leader, some sort of change in directive. I mean, sometimes you're backfilling something that's already been built, and we absolutely do that. But what I'm trying to find is the area to improve. There's got to be one piece. It's like, okay, well, now it's a transformational role because we've got this area of from a deal desk overrides percentage, or I don't know, something that we can come in and they need to go and fix. So that's our angle to writing these positions up. So we call them transformational roles. FP&A, we also work. And sometimes it's these big transformations, but a lot of times it's kind of filling the box, and someone that's got a little bit of a strategic, they can kind of come in and give better advice to the company over, from a financial planning perspective, and, you know, kind of build out some more KPIs and drive change where, pricing, I think, is typically more immature than finance and these companies. So transformation just kind of fits, and that's always what we're doing. I mean, sometimes it's a backfill someone pretty good, but typically it's taking something that really hasn't been built before, at least to the level we're talking about, and going and building it. So we always use that.
And I would also guess that if I were trying to backfill someone, your services are less valuable to me than if I'm trying to build a transformation. Because you guys actually have done this so many times, you know what it takes, you've seen it. And so the guidance on providing a transformation seems much bigger than the guidance in hiring a pricing person.
Yeah, I think our services should yield a big ROI on both, but I would say, yeah, the ROI is much higher on the transformation side. But if you can mess up something that's already built pretty easily and in a hurry in pricing, with the wrong individual that's going to come in, especially because you have to put a big emphasis on culture, because you start kind of really ticking off the VP of sales, and things can go off the rails in a hurry. And especially in today's environment, it seems like, especially in the United States, there's more volatility, right? So you don't know what's around the corner as far as a new tariff coming in, or kind of rampant inflation. So having the right leadership in place to be able to navigate that is big. And I think so even those roles where it's more mature, and also bringing someone in, it's like, okay, they've got all this cool modeling and stuff they're doing in pricing. Well, how can I help the rest of the organization? And that maybe we should change. This is enterprise analytics. It's maybe not like pricing anymore. That's an element. Like let's upgrade that and bring someone in that can kind of come in and drive change across your org. Obviously, there's some, because it's like, okay, the first 18 months, there's some cool stuff in pricing, and then beyond that, where can they drive change? They can build some sort of model to help even with acquisitions, because if you take this side off, what that does to your pricing, so where to acquire other businesses, and based on the modeling that they build on the pricing side. So that's where everything we're looking at from this standpoint is transformation.
Mark, I'd also say on that, just thinking about, even if it's an established pricing team and you're putting a new leader over that group or a new person into that group, businesses I've worked at, our internal HR team, our internal recruiting groups were great, but they just don't get a lot of at bats filling a pricing role, like branch manager role, outside sales role. Like, they fill those a lot. And I'd say even the same thing with some of the larger recruiting firms. So I know when I was on the other side of the table in industry and was having recruiters call me about joining a company to fill a pricing role, they just didn't have a depth of knowledge about what the role was in order to help figure out whether I was the right fit for that role or not. I felt like often I was educating the recruiter about the role they were trying to fill and then letting them know whether I was a good fit for it or not.
Right.
Where where this role and working with Jon, like, we have a real depth of knowledge of the space. So when we're talking to clients about what their challenges are and what the role is, we get a really good understanding of what it is, which then allows us to really explain that to candidates and get the right person excited about it.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Okay, I have two more topics I want to cover, and we don't have that much time left. So, uh, first topic:
Speed round.
do you ever work on hiring a pricing person for the private equity firm itself, as opposed to for the portfolio company? How's that different? What does that look like?
So yes, and a lot of times we'll be working with that person down into the portfolio company, so that you kind of go to the. Usually, this is reserved for the large, top 20, top 30 PE organizations. Maybe going, it's kind of going down. People are more getting it's kind of, pricing advisor, where it's someone that's worked in consulting and industry, impressive career, and they come and they're doing their kind of sprinkling their magic pricing pixie dust across all the different portcos. So they're coming in on the front end after, kind of within diligence, post diligence of saying, hey, let's help build this roadmap, from a pricing transformation standpoint. And that's where, having someone that's dedicated that knows that is great. Now, one thing we do to help them, because sometimes these deals are coming through really fast and they get overextended and they can't spend 40 hours a week at a portco. So we'll offer to like kind of provide them a fractional person will be an arm to them into the portco. They can help with the RFP and has done a bunch of these. If they're looking to do consulting or whatever it is, as far as bringing a firm or, assessing the current situation on the ground. But yeah, we've seen more and more private equity building out like the advisor capability within pricing. And a lot of times, the bigger ones will hire multiple folks, and they kind of, are help with the transformation, talk to whoever it's reporting to a lot, and massage the C-suite on the, what this pricing org could do for the organization as a whole. And then, kind of as you go down to smaller organizations, that smaller private equities, they can't afford within each portco to hire a dedicated pricing person. They just don't have the lift doesn't justify the dedicated resource because they're so much smaller. You can kind of put someone that's more of an analyst, like have a consultant come across all the smaller portcos, and assess where the impact can be, set something up, educate the different C-suite executives and sales teams and all that, and then place more permanent analyst that can work across multiple portcos at the kind of the PE level and share that resource across. I've seen that model, quite a bit be effective as well.
So as we think about pricing careers evolving and the pricing profession and specialty evolving, that's another place where more senior folks later in their careers can be their next step is to go into one of these larger PE firms as a pricing advisor.
Nice, nice. Okay, last topic I want to cover, and hopefully we can do this quickly, but probably not. AI. Do I even need to ask a question? What are people using for AI? How are you finding pricing? Heck, I've been in pricing for forever, and I'm struggling to grasp how AI impacts this whole field. And so how is that influencing or impacting what you guys are doing?
I'll let Ryan kick us off because he's got some passionate thoughts about kind of, the maturity of organizations and when they can implement like a full-on AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think having really solid foundational data that's clean and of high quality is super important in a business to support AI. And most businesses aren't there yet. So getting your data at a place where it can really support AI, I think is important. That said, I think there are some areas around the edges where it can be super valuable out of the gate. Rebate design is a really interesting one. You know, give it your fundamental template of how your company does rebates and give it your strategy of what you're trying to accomplish and characteristics of your customer and see what it comes out with for rebates, I think is really interesting. Another interesting use case for it for negotiation is have AI pretend it's your customer and have it advise them on how to negotiate with you in prep to go negotiate price with the customer. So I think when people say AI, like, oh, well, I'm going to put data into it and it's going to set all my prices for me. I think we're a ways from that. But the more you play with it, the more you can probably find some interesting fringe cases around the edges that it can add a ton of value without a lot of investment.
Yeah, so I love the fact that you mentioned direct or specific use cases because that's valuable. People can use it. Um, in the world of B2C, I could see it, we've been using AI forever, right? I mean, we've got pros and all the pricing systems, and I mean, it may not be the LLMs that we have today, but it's still been AI. In the world of B2B, this is really fascinating right now. I mean, so the negotiation use case was really interesting. Um, I was talking to one pricing person who said he crafted 2 different AIs to negotiate with each other so that he could watch it. I
That's awesome. I hadn't thought of
thought
that.
I thought that was really good. I thought that was really good. But in this B2B world, it just is I'm struggling to figure it out,
I
right?
think
Because everybody's got their own process.
another interesting use case for it is dealing with competitive data. So I got this quote from one of my competitors, and the matching SKUs is always hard.
Uh-huh.
What's my competitor's SKU description? Is it really exactly the same as my SKU description? How do the numbers match up? Like building that bridge table can be a real challenge and a real impediment to using competitor data. I think using AI to help clean up your data that way and say, here's a list of SKUs, here's 2 lists of SKUs, match them up with each other the best you can. Gives somebody who understands your products really well, an 80% of the way starting point to make some tweaks. So I think it can and help you with your competitive data matching if you're doing top shots.
Okay, I wanna throw this back into the world of recruiting now. How do you recruit someone? What are you looking for knowing that AI is gonna be really important a year from now, if it's not today? How are you using that AI in recruiting? Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me make sure I'm clear. I would guess most pricing people are not experts in AI today. What are the requirements that we're looking for in pricing people as we start to place them in companies?
It's a good question and something we probably need to put more thought into, to be honest, because it is rapid. I mean, it is just changes every quarter. It's like there's some new LLM that's doing something crazy. I've been playing with the O3 on GPT and like the amount of the way it can triangulate market research based off of all this disparate information and you see the logic that it goes through is pretty wild. I think the big piece is being able to prompt and to ask the right questions. Getting the data into there. That's one thing. The other thing is, okay, how do you use it? It's a backboard. It can be a massive accelerant. So I think something we probably should start asking is how have you how have you used it on a day to day basis? Some companies are really strict on the usage because of obviously proprietary data. It's not secure. We're looking at building something in house for us here, and we've been using it, leveraging it a lot on our side. So we've got a lot of different interesting ways we've used it, and I think what we probably need to do is start implementing this into um, our interview cadence of trying to figure out ways, because it's all about just being creative on how you interact with the tool at the end of the day, to be able to leverage it properly. I think people that are, I'm a big evangelist of this stuff internally, and I think it's increased our capacity a pretty insane amount and our quality simultaneously, which is nice.
It's a force multiplier.
Yeah.
It takes, if you do it right, I think it takes every person and gives them a team to manage that,
And I tell people, like, plug, everything you're doing on a day-to-day basis, it's plug it in. Like, I think if you look at people, like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, kind of when the iPhone came out, the more senior folks, like, they struggled to use it. The kids were like, yeah. Like, I think today with AI, it's the same thing, where, just plugging in and asking certain questions where, the younger generation that's coming up in college, they're super users. I mean, they're using it for everything. They don't live their life without plugging it in to AI. Every decision they make when they're negotiating their gas bill, like, everything is going in to this, and it's becoming it's becoming more of an operating system than anything. And so that's how I think, as we're talking about implementing it, it needs to become your operating system on a day-to-day basis within your job. And Ryan laughs because I'm like, "What are you gonna do? You gonna plug what I said into GPT?" And and I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And that's where that's what I want this to be a DNA of our organization. And I think as we think about interviewing candidates, it's something that needs to be the forefront. But we're right there on that precipice where it hasn't been. We're not getting that demand from the client, but we probably need to tell them it needs to be a demand, right? But that can be said for any part of the organization, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I could see, I love the line of creativity. I would say the step before that is you have to be open to it. And then once you're open to it, it's like, well, now how can I just be creative and use it for many different things? And
Yeah.
I think that's cool. Guys, this has been fascinating. I hugely appreciate it, especially like the AI conversation at the end because it's so hard for me. If anybody wants to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Check out our website, JenningsEXEC.com. Look me up, Jon, Jon, no H, Jennings on LinkedIn, and Ryan Walter. And, hit us up. We'll, whether it's, I would say, from hey, I just want to know if my team's, kind of organized correctly. Am I paying the right people enough money? Whatever it is, we'll provide all the consulting on the front end. It's not, you don't have to sign up or do anything. We'll dive in and help you in any way we can, with the caveat of, if there's a need, like, hit us up and we'll fill the box, or help you build it and fill it. And we build teams as well as place leaders. So we want to know the next generation coming up. We're also trying to educate people in other areas to get into pricing. And we're constantly trying to promote the field. I think there needs to be. I'm not a manufacturer of talent, but we're trying to nudge people into the space. So feel free to reach out to us, or if connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's someone you'd like to be connected with that I know well, just hit me up and we'll be happy to facilitate it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
And
Mark.
my pleasure. To our listeners, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And finally, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.
Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.